everybody. Thank you all for joining us and welcome to the first Battle Bluetongue webinar of 2026. My name is Zoe Lloyd. I'm an animal health and welfare scientist at AHDB, and I'll just be covering off some of the housekeeping before handing over to your chair for this evening, Neil Shand. Neil is the CEO for the National Beef Association. So I'm delighted to be joined today by some excellent speakers, including Pilar Romero, who is the veterinary advisor for the Animal and Plant Health Agency, who will be talking us through the winter surveillance results and findings, as well as providing us with an update on cases. Philippa Page, who is the president of the Sheep Veterinary Society, who will discuss some of the impacts of BTV3 on sheep fertility and what to look out for ahead of the fast approaching lambing season, and Laura Roberts, who is a BCVA board member and a farm vet, covering off the new guidance which will be issued by BCVA on vaccinating pregnant ruminants. And we'll also be joined by Gordon Hickman, who is the head of exotic disease policy for DEFRA. Gordon is unable to have his camera on due to travelling, but will be available to help with the Q&A discussions we have planned. So this webinar is being recorded and the link will be circulated within 24 hours to those who have signed up. If you have any technical difficulties today, please note that the recording is being shared and will be uploaded onto YouTube too. If you'd like to record your CPD for the webinar, you're very welcome to scan the QR code in the corner. And please do put your questions in the chat box at the top right-hand side of your screen. Here you should see a speech bubble with a question mark in it. So we will hear from each speaker in turn, and then after each presentation, we will have a discussion incorporating your questions. So please don't wait until the end to submit your questions. Please submit them as soon as you can. And then at the end of the webinar, you will get the option to complete a feedback form where you can provide us with some feedback from the webinar. And then please also do keep an eye out on the Ruminant Health and Welfare and AHDB websites for future webinars too. I also just wanted to briefly highlight the tools and resources we have available on the AHDB and Ruminant Health and Welfare Bluetongue Hub. Here, there are a range of tools designed to support vets and help farmers make the decision on whether to vaccinate their stock against BTV3 and also when. So these are all completely free to download and use, so please do make use of these through the Ruminant Health and Welfare and AHDB websites. And then just for awareness, there is lots of additional support available out there, and there's more information on the Ruminant Health and Welfare website for you to find out more. And then lastly, this has been an industry initiative, so I'd just like to say a massive thank you to everyone who has been involved. So without further ado, I will now hand over to our chair for this evening, Neil. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zoe, for that splendid introduction and a good coverage of the housekeeping. So just before we move to our first speaker tonight, I just want to cover some information I think that's relevant and probably important. I was involved in my first Bluetongue meeting in this, what we could still say is a current outbreak in November 2023. And here we all are, almost at the end of the first month in 2026, and it's still very relevant. And in many cases, I think it's still invisible and hard to see. Since we had the last webinar early December, we've had cases in Northern Ireland, now Southern Ireland, and also the Isle of Man, during a period when a lot of people would surmise that this disease is not really relevant. And with that in mind, and as we're away now to hear about the sort of winter surveillance, I can only actively encourage everyone to remain as vigilant as possible. And if you're at all suspicious of Bluetongue in any way, that you please report it initially to your private vet. And slightly, as Zoe has alluded to, slightly changed format this year. So we'll have a pause after every speaker and go through any relevant points or questions at that point, so we'll not leave all the questions to the end. So I'm actively asking you to throw your questions in the chat and the question function as quickly as possible. So that's all for me for now. Pilar, the stage is yours, please.
Thank you, very nice. Thank you very much, Neil, and it is great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm just going to try to share a window with my presentation, and I will start the presenter mode now. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, all good, Pilar, all good.
Thank you very much. So they should start transitioning now. So from the 10th of July until the 27th of January, there have been 281 cases of positive farms to Bluetongue, over 90% in England and the remaining in Wales. Nearly all were positive to BTV3. 7 farms were positive to BTV3 and to BTV8, but not in the same animals. And there was a case of a single animal positive to BTV8 in another farm. During the same period, there were 685 positive animals. Again, over 90% in England and 7% in Wales, nearly all BTV3, and there were 12 animals positive to BTV8. The vast majority of them were cattle, followed by sheep, and there were 3 deer in same state in East Sussex, picked up via pre-movement testing. The county most affected as far as our records go is Cornwall, followed by Devon. Just over half of the BTV cases were detected by report cases. The 7 BTV3 and 8 cases were detected via winter surveillance in 5 instances, and in report cases in the last 2. The single BTV8 case was detected by a report case, as mentioned, in a sheep hobby farm. So the top surveillance stream is report cases, as mentioned, and a quarter of cases were then detected by winter surveillance. And if we grouped all the movement-related tests that we carry out, that turns out to be the third surveillance stream, picking up 30 cases, or 11% of them. And you can see here how the confirmations of Bluetongue unfolded this season week by week, as well as the excess cases picked up via the winter surveillance, winter survey wells and test surveillance wells while they were on. In terms of the description of the positive animals, the majority of them, 84% of 685 positive animals, were adults, and nearly 3/4 were female. In terms of the 12 BTV8 positive animals, they were all female. There was 1 8-year-old ewe used only for grazing in this hobby flock, and that was the index case of BTV8, followed by 11 cattle, 10 of them cows and 1 calf. And the same pattern of a majority of adults and females in cattle confirmed has been seen in England as well as in Wales. In terms of clinical signs at animal level, if we just give an overview of the positive farms first, over half of the farms that reported Bluetongue reported animals showing clinical signs, 55% of them, or 154. And 34 farms out of these 154, in those cases, the animals were showing either infertility, abortion, or milk drop. In terms of the animals now, 673 BTV3 positive animals were recorded, and 30% of them did show clinical signs, and this amounted to 201, and 58 of those showed either infertility, abortion, or milk drop. And looking at the 12 BTV8 positive animals, 3 of them show clinical signs, and 2 of those showed either these breeding-related signs, either infertility, abortion, or milk drop. And you can see the breakdown by serotype of the animals that showed clinical signs, and the vast majority of them serotype 3 and bovines. In terms of the top clinical signs reported, and bearing in mind there could be more than 1 clinical sign reported in the same animal, the top one is nose or muzzle skin lesion, followed by pyrexia. And if you look at the breakdown by species, those 2 are also the top ones for bovine, for cattle, and those are also the 2nd and 3rd reported in sheep, and the top sign in sheep has been nasal discharge. And now I will move on to the Bluetongue winter surveillance update. This End of season BTV surveillance exercise follows the same pattern as the BTV surveys that we carried out from 2017 to 2023 and the winter surveillance carried out last year. The aim is to give confidence in the lack of undetected vector-borne incursions of Bluetongue. Nowadays, we aim to look for absent BTV serotypes in the country, and the detection levels are the same as 5% at animal level prevalence with 95% confidence. So this is carried out annually. As mentioned, it's a statutory risk-based surveillance, and now we make use of the Bluetongue regulations to require a compulsory participation. It is designed and overseen by APHA EpiRisk in collaboration with others, managed by UK Farm Care and implemented by delivery partners. Only cattle is tested using plant visits, and there's some eligibility criteria for the cattle, including they can't be vaccinated for BTV3 as long as they have been vaccinated over 7 days ago. And only a round of PCR testing is carried out, and you can see the teams involved in this exercise. In terms of deciding which counties we're going to target each year, it is a combination of modelling to see the risk of midges seen as particles carried out in plumes from the near continent, and the disease situation in the near continent, which gives us an idea of the risk of those midges being infected or infectious. And this year, we hence looked at the BTV8 incursions from France as priority. And looking historically at the number of times plumes from French sources have intercepted us, we targeted all counties in the southern coast of England from Cornwall all the way to Kent, and we included Somerset for the first time, given its proximity to the coast. We carried out an additional round in Cornwall, called Cornwall 1, to act as area surveillance for BTV8, with a total of 112 holdings sampled and 1,568 cattle sampled, 14 per holding. And this was carried out from the 1st of November till the 31st of December, except the first run of Cornwall, which took place in October. And you can see how the number of holdings is proportional to the size of the county, and how there was a second round of Cornwall to account for the whole high-risk period of summer carried out from November onwards. All counties demonstrated the presence of BTV3. We move on to the results. BTV8 was detected in Cornwall and in the Isle of Wight, in the same farms where BTV3 had also been confirmed, but not in the same animals as mentioned previously. No other serotypes were detected. In terms of BTV8, you can see how the farms, there were 3 in Cornwall, first round, 1 in Cornwall during the second round in this county, and another one in the Hampshire and Isle of Wight geographical area of interest. And you can see in a bar chart the breakdown between positives and negatives in each county. The farms are selected by UK Farm Care, aiming to have them as evenly distributed as possible within the 50-kilometre strip from the coast. In addition, this year we also carried out a voluntary opt-in screening for episodic hemorrhagic disease virus, and 80 out of the 98 farmers that participated in the proper round of BTV winter surveillance participated, and all results were negative. I have to thank the DEFRA Exotics policy team, all the farmers in at-risk counties that participated in this surveillance exercise, the UK Farm Care and veterinary delivery partners, Met Office and Purbright Institute colleagues, as well as APHA colleagues in various teams. That's the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pilar. So I'm going to invite the rest of the panel to come back on screen at this point, if that's possible, in case they have any questions. Pilar, a couple of things to pull out from that, and this is an observation from being part of the core group. If I pulled this out, 143 report cases in 2025. Would you know how many report cases we had in 2024?
Yes, I can get those numbers. I mean, not from the top of my head, but I can get those. Yeah. I can check them out and put the report, and I can look.
Because I have a feeling that there were far more report cases in 2025 than what there were in 2024. It's just a feeling that I have.
Yes, I think so too, but I can get you the numbers.
Yeah, great. And just while you're doing that, 70% of the cases found didn't show any clinical signs at all. And is that not another reminder of how silent and quiet this disease can be, and it can be hard to find until, as we've seen in some suckler herds and dairy herds with milk challenge and calf losses, the damage is done before you know it's there.
Yes, certainly. And I mean, that's anecdotal evidence, but discussing with a vet that had a positive farm detected, a VDP colleague, he wanted to know more about this, and he actually mentioned that there had been a few lame heifers in the farm that then turned out to be positive and picked up by the BTV winter surveillance. In other cases, the farmers triggered private tests because they see clinical signs and they want to rule out Bluetongue, and those could have been report cases. In fact, we had 4 private tests confirmed yesterday. In one of them, there's no information, but in the others, that they were trying to rule out Bluetongue because of the presence of abortions. So it is something to bear in mind, that although the signs are unspecific and sometimes very limited, particularly in cattle, they could be Bluetongue if you see things like this.
And is it unusual that we're seeing the amount of testing that's being done at this time of year, considering the period of weather we've had maybe since the middle of December? Or is this put it a different way, is there a sign that there's potentially going to be an awful lot of overwintering from last year into this year, and the challenge this year, depending on the weather, maybe from May onwards, we could be faced with some serious disease challenge?
Certainly, we are seeing the same pattern of abortions, and we have had damaged calves as well. And depending on the time of infection, there could be overwintering and even healthy calves being born in spring from infected cows, and that's a mechanism for overwinter, irrespective of whether we are now in the seasonal vector low period. And we saw that last year when we continued to have cases until the 31st of May. And then we started again in the summer, but it is certainly a worry that we are already, with the virus being overwinter, and certainly the first cases picked up in this season were not in areas of incursion from the continent. So there was a first case was in Hertfordshire, and it's due to virus that was already present in the country. Yeah. So we continue to have infections from virus that is already here.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got some more questions. Winter surveillance. Are you testing for antibody or live virus?
It's PCR, so virus fragments in the blood, and because the PCR will pick up infections that could have taken place up to 5 or 6 months ago, that covers the whole summer period, and the animals will still be PCR positive, and that's what we're looking for. I mean, antibodies could be positive for Bluetongue for years after infection, but we focus on the animals that could have picked up infection during the summer, and that's what we test them in between November and December. Yeah.
Okay. I think I know the answer to this, and we may have to come back to it, but do you have any information about the winter surveillance done on the Welsh border?
Yes, there have been some cases picked up by that stream, and again, I can get you the accurate numbers for those. And those, well, actually, they were on the graphs because those are the ones. There were 2 surveillance exercises carried out in Wales, and one was the TZ surveillance as a result of the temporary control zone put up, and there were 7 farms. And the BTV Winter Survey Wales, and that was running along the border with England and then in the coastal parts of Wales, and those picked up another 7 cases. Yeah, that's actually in the slides. So 14 cases picked up by a surveillance in Wales in total.
Okay. BTV8, and you had some projected weather plumes from France. Is it too early to say that that could have been a single low-level incursion, and BTV8 is maybe not going to be a major factor this year, or is it just too early to say?
I mean, the exercise is finished, and whether there's BTV8 circulated or not, I mean, the jury is out, and it's not a decision, but there have been, you know, a number of farms affected by BTV8 with a limited amount of animals in those. But whether there's a wider involvement of BTV8 or there have been separate incursions, we cannot tell for sure.
Yeah, and have we seen any disease level differences between BTV3 and BTV8 in terms of more severe or less severe clinical signs?
Well, we have seen the same signs. So I saw how we could see that, and even when there were very few animals affected by BTV8, we saw also these fertility problems and other signs typical that we had seen. In fact, that the index case was picked up with typical Bluetongue signs, and you know, these other ones have been detected in even few animals. And it surprised me, the wide range. We have seen the same clinical signs in BTV8 and in BTV3, but there are very few animals, so it's very difficult to have a complete picture of the manifestation of BTV8. But in principle, it looks like it could cause with the same clinical signs.
Yeah, okay. Next question. Do you have any information on the percentage of positive animals found on the positive surveillance farms to give an idea of the spread on farm?
Yes, and it is quite interesting that these we have a wide range information on that. So in some cases there has been a single animal picked up out of the 14 sample, but in other cases they were 13 animals, nearly all of them. So it varies a lot. We have seen how, as well, in terms of farms in East Sussex and West Sussex, 7 out of the 7 holdings sample were positive to Bluetongue as well. But yes, it is quite wide range prevalence on farm as well.
Yeah, great. Laura, Philippa, do you have any questions for Pilar at this stage? No? Okay, so whilst we change speakers, we're going to move to Philippa. Thank you, Pilar, very much for that. And I know you're staying around for the whole hour. We'll now move on to Philippa, and I encourage everyone just to keep, please, open questions in the chat. And we'll come to them. We'll have a break again after Philippa's presentation. Thank you, Philippa. Stage is yours.
Sorry, that's better. Can you hear me now okay?
Yeah, all good.
Sorry, I've just seemed to have knocked my... I'm going to stop sharing and start again. There we go. That's better. Is that okay? You see that okay?
Yeah, presentation mode now. Great. Good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Thanks for inviting me to speak this evening. So we thought it was probably quite timely to talk about the impacts of BTV3 on sheep fertility and what we know. I feel like I need to say at the start that we don't have huge information on this at the moment, but it might be useful to just go through a few things around barren rates and scanning rates, because we're starting to get these in now, and obviously we're approaching lambing season, which has already started on some farms. So we do have, and Pilar's information showed this nicely or not on the graphs, that we have little knowledge of how BTV3 affects ewe fertility. We know that it does affect the maternal recognition of the markers of pregnancy, and therefore we can get early embryonic losses, certainly in cattle, and we expect that to happen in sheep, but we don't have that information, and we may miss that because with sheep, I guess, we get repeated mating opportunities, so it might be unnoticed that they on infection, happen to lose that early pregnancy. That said, in Europe, where we see high mortality rates in sheep from BTB3, we haven't seen, in which case the pregnancy effects or effects on fertility may not be noticed because death is more likely. We haven't seen that pattern of behaviour with BTB3 in the UK, and so again, that impacts upon what we can determine is going to happen if it does infertility. So we know that it causes infertility in rams, and therefore there is potential for high barren rates in ewes due to ram infertility, and we know that in cattle it will cause abnormalities and brain defects, which have been reported in calves in the UK, that they haven't been reported in lambs in lambing season last year or before that, but we are approaching lambing again now, so it's really helpful for anybody that suspects any of these that they speak to your vet with concerns, but we'll cover that in a second on the next slide. So if we're concerned about BTV causing by high barren rates, I think it's really important to concentrate or think about common things that cause reduced scanning and high barren rates, and discuss with your vet or your advisor to avoid making assumptions that it could be BTV3, because otherwise, if we make assumptions on what's caused it, we are far less likely to either pick up BTB, Bluetongue infection, or pick up the actual cause of what may cause a high barren rate. And there are many non-infectious causes, and this year in particular we expect that the impact of the drought conditions in certain areas of the UK, not all areas but in big chunks of areas of the UK, we had really limited nutrition, which has led to reduced body condition score at mating and impacts on barren rates, and increased numbers of singles rather than twins are starting to filter through from some areas in the UK. Trace element deficiencies have been prevalent this last year, and so again we've got the issues of selenium and iodine impacting upon scanning rates, and then stressful events such as dog attacks, anything that happens, stressful handling, transport in that early period can impact upon a high barren rate. So I think it's important, as we're starting to get these, if we get these high rates through, discuss it and think about what the causes may be. And if we look at the infectious causes, again, common things are common, which are frequently detected on farms as barren rates, such as toxoplasmosis, border disease virus, Schmallenberg disease. We do expect less impact from that this year because of the previous high levels in previous recent years, but again that is to be considered. Subacute fluke will impact upon barren rates and scanning rates. Tick-borne fever, which we are seeing increasingly. Bluetongue 3 is on that list, as are iceberg diseases such as Johne's and Maida-Vizsna. So there's a number of non-infectious, infectious causes of which Bluetongue is implicated in potentially affecting high barren rates and having a reduced scanning percentage. But it's worth, if nothing else, investigating these alongside what your concerns may be, because these will have big impacts on flock performance if we find these and can deal with them. So it's really important that we maybe don't make those assumptions that it could be Bluetongue or not. So I think as we approach lambing time, it's really important for farmers to speak to their vet in the first instance, and there's vets on the call, so I'm sure you would agree that you want to speak to your farmers and speak to them, have that advice, especially if they've got high numbers of abortions, if they've got increased numbers of weak lambs or lambs that are abnormal. And really, to the vets, we're encouraging the discussion with your local APHA vets. They can help guide you and make sure that whatever investigation you do, it will proceed in the way in which we can either get an answer, if there's one there, or if we consider Bluetongue, how to approach that. So it may be that an abortion investigation takes place at the laboratory, or it may be that you discuss doing on-farm postmortems and taking samples, in which case, speaking with your local APHA, they can advise you on the appropriate material to sample and appropriate blood samples to take. And if there are BTV suspicions from yourselves as vets or farmers, or from the APHA vets, it does require a different approach to how that investigation may go on. So, for example, it may be that you take samples from one farm and submit them to different laboratories, Pirbright being the main one. But really, you need to avoid any delay in actually approaching what's causing problems on farm, and make sure that you're sending the right samples and that we're getting the results back in a good, timely fashion. It's important that you first of all have that conversation, and then you can make a plan. So we want farmers to speak with their vets, and we really want vets to speak to the local APHA vets to decide on how to proceed with any issues that they might see. Okay, Gordon, that's Neil, that's my slide there.
Philippa, thank you very much. Right, I'll invite the rest of the panel to come back again as we did previously. And before we maybe otherwise dig into some of the detail on that, Philippa, we've landed a question here that is just perfect, I think, based on your presentation. So I will just read it out as it reads. So I would like to exclude BTV, for example, poor conception rates in cattle or sheep, but no other indications of BTV. How can I go about that? I presume I need APHA approval. Would I be allowed to test for antibody, virus, or both? What would be the ramifications if they were positive for BTV virus or antibody? And this is the nuance of this question is, I'm on the Welsh border, so it could be either Wales or England. So it's an absolutely great. It's probably one of the best webinar questions. I'm joking. All questions remain anonymous, so we don't disclose names. So it's a cracking question. So.
I know. So so let me see if I can, and then I'm going to seek advice from others. Practically, this is where, and I know I've sort of overemphasizing the point, but really having that discussion with APHA will then mean that they can best advise you on the procedure if you want to go that way, in terms of the test codes, in terms of the pricing, in terms of whether it is if it's suspected, then there's a chance there. And I think Gordon, if he can hear, may be able to help. If it's a suspicion, then it needs to be reported as a report case, in which case then that can trigger the next set of steps to make sure that they're taking the right samples from the right animals. Does anybody want to come in there?
I just had a quick look on the government website. There's quite a helpful page about the different types of testing available. So if, like Philippa said, if you suspect disease, there's a phone number for England and a phone number for Wales. And then there's a page on private testing and what that includes. So pre-movement testing, but there's also a section on there about testing to suspicion privately, which I would assume would cover what you're talking about, i.e. reduced conception rates. But as Philippa said, I would speak to the APHA in the first instance, because for some suspect disease cases, there is funding for the first 3 samples. So you might be eligible for that depending on clinical signs and where you are.
Yeah, and just for everyone's benefit, so we are aware that Gordon's travelling and his access to reasonable Wi-Fi is challenged. So Gordon has answered that question directly back to the person who owns the question, and I'm happy to read out the answer. You know, if you really suspect disease, you know, contact APHA. In terms of the ramifications, and Pilar, you'll correct me if I'm wrong with this, in either England or Wales at the moment, there would be minimal, if not zero, trading restrictions if disease was identified.
Yes, that's right. Yes, there's movement between England and Wales.
Yeah, so I think we again, it's something that we need to put out there, that people should not be concerned about reporting the disease, because across the English-Welsh border and across the whole of England, we need to know the disease is there. We don't want it hidden, and and other than some strange findings, there will be no restrictions on the business operating. So.
If it's B2B3, there will not be restrictions in the operator. If the other serotypes at the moment in England, the positive animals are restricted, and then Wales will decide near the time what will happen. But yeah, definitely no restrictions in positives for B2B3, not on the holding, not on the animals.
But BTV8 would be slightly more complicated in the short term.
Yes, that's right. Yes,
Yeah.
in England at the moment, only the animals were restricted, not the holding.
Yeah, great. Philippa, digging a little bit deep, are we too early in the year to get some broad feedback on sheep scanning results to see if there are massive or any variations from last year, and have we got the caveat of last year's weather, or maybe even this autumn's wet weather, that could create anomalies anyway?
Yeah, exactly that, Neil. I think so if you remember recently or last year, myself and Rudolph and Fiona, we did a podcast, an AHDB podcast for sheep scanners, with similar advice to what we've talked about this evening, in terms of trying to get a handle on are we seeing increased barren rates, are we seeing reduced scanning percentages, and it's really difficult to evaluate that, because we struggle with baselines, and usually that information is very farm specific, and actually the problems that cause influences on scanning rates on individual farms are also very specific as well. So from current information that I'm receiving from my local farmers and farmers across the UK, is that there is a real variety in scanning rates this year, and I seem to be having as many high barren rates as we're having as many high scanning percentages. So it's not giving a clear picture.
Yeah, great, thank you. Gordon's added a bit more to his answer on that question, and I'm not sure if all attendees can see that, but the question for the English-Welsh border with perhaps concerns about potential Bluetongue, you can actually submit a private submission test via your private vet, so that would give you feedback, and that would be a means of finding out very quickly if you have a disease risk. Pilar, Laura, have you got any questions for Philippa?
I don't, but if there's nothing else, I can tell you the number of report cases in 2024-25 and the percentage of the total cases that they were. And yes, our impression was correct, that there were, out of 262 cases, there were 112 picked up by report cases, 43%. So lower than this year, which is 51%, and 143 so far. The season hasn't ended, but yes, so far more are picked up by report cases than in the last season.
Yeah, so almost a third more, just rough figures, almost a third more. So that adds to the concerns that we could still face some challenging breeding periods when you start lambing and cows start calving. We're concerned about that, especially in the areas where you carried out perhaps the winter surveillance and where we saw high disease prevalence during the late summer and into the autumn. So yeah, thank you very much for digging that out in the background. If there's nothing else for Philippa, we will move on to Laura. Actively encourage everyone on the webinar to continue to thump their questions into the question box, and we'll revert as a team once we've heard from Laura and her presentation. Laura, over to you.
Can you hear me okay?
Sorry,
Yep.
yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
Laura, sorry.
Hi everyone, thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. We, as in BCVA and SVS, have put together a short guidance for vets in practice to hopefully answer some questions, clear up some things. It's a one-pager, bullet points, easy to read, hopefully, that will be going out early next week via BCVA and SVS, and hopefully be on the Bluetongue hub. We've done this because we've had some feedback that vets in practice are still a bit unsure or have questions, particularly around vaccination and fertility in cattle and sheep. So just thought I'd run through what we've got so far. But none of this is particularly new information. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but it is just meant to be a one-stop shop for you can have a glance at and see what the advice is. So yeah, the aim of this was to provide a one-sided document to help vets in practice and give advice around Bluetongue vaccination and provide clarity for vets and farmers on the use of Bluetongue vaccine, particularly in pregnant ruminants. So most of this text is literally a copy and paste off the document, so I won't go into it too much, but one part that we cover quite heavily is the fertility side, and there is rumour and anecdotal and all sorts of chat, I think, which happened previously with the Bluetongue 8 outbreak about vaccination and fertility. And what we're trying to do is, with the data that we've got, put the message out there that there seems to be no link between vaccination with Bluetongue virus 3 vaccination and fertility. So what we do know is that Bluetongue 3 infection is associated with significant adverse reproductive outcomes, including reduced fertility, impaired semen quality, temporary infertility in rams and bulls, abortion, fetal abnormalities. And yeah, the evidence shows no indication that Bluetongue virus 3 vaccination adversely affects fertility in ewes or cows, in contrast to the effects of natural infection. There's a little bit there on timing. So ideally, we want to get this vaccine course complete and into them at least 3 weeks pre any kind of mating where possible. I appreciate in the field that is difficult sometimes, depending on your geography or the disease risk. But ideally, that's what we would say for other vaccines that aren't Bluetongue vaccines, is try and get into them in a timely manner before you want to start breeding them, and before the onset of anticipated risk period. So aiming to get the vaccine in them 3 weeks before starting mating, and ideally by early May, so that it's kicked in before the high risk period. Yeah, and then a little bit there on prevention of reproductive losses. So given the severe effects of Bluetongue on both female and male fertility, vaccination program should aim to be completed before virus circulation is likely on the farm. So again, that's a bit of a geography thing, but with movement that's happening all over England and Wales now, yeah, maybe not so much. I touched on it already, but breeding management to try and protect conception firstly and early pregnancy, as Philip has alluded to, try and get it in them 3 weeks before the rams are introduced to the flock. Where you can get it, if you're going to vaccinate the rams, do them in plenty of time before they're going in with the ewes, just in case, it's a viral vaccine. It's not a thing that's unique to Bluetongue vaccinations, but it's something we would advise with most vaccinations that they're on board well before you want to use them. There's no evidence that the vaccine does affect fertility or pregnancy, so it may be safely administered to healthy rams and ewes up to the day before mating if required for disease control purposes. So it's not too late. If suddenly your client wants to vaccinate, you can get it in them and there shouldn't be an issue. That comes with a caveat of early pregnancy considerations. As with any management intervention, unnecessary stress should be avoided in early gestation. So that is gathering up cattle, sheep to vaccine before pregnancy or in early pregnancy. It's suboptimal, but if the risk of Bluetongue incursion is higher, then this is what you've got to weigh up with your clients. I'm sure this is going to come up tonight, and unfortunately I can't give you much more than what we already know about revaccination and duration of immunity and boosters and timing. What we do know is that manufacturers anticipate approximately 12 months of protection. I think we learned that in the last webinar we had before Christmas. That was what the data was looking like. We still haven't got that published data yet. As soon as it's out, it will be hopefully in the public domain quickly, so we can get that out to you. But at the moment, that is what we're working with, unconfirmed, but likely 12 months. Annual boosters should be planned in line with recommended pre-risk period timing. So I'm aware as a vet in practice also that there's questions coming in now about when to do it, and you want to turn cattle or sheep out or whatever, and now is a better time to do it when they're housed. And if the timing works now, then do it now. Don't wait until they're out and then have to get them back in if that's going to be a big job. Yeah, perhaps I'll touch on that a bit more with the questions. And then just on a safety note, as with all viral vaccines, administration in early or late pregnancy should be carefully considered, but that is not a risk unique to Bluetongue vaccination and does not indicate a specific fertility concern. The post-marketing experience indicates a strong safety. Manufacturers report millions of doses across Europe administered with very, very low incidence of adverse events. And although the use in breeding bulls is not stated on the data sheet, they're lacking formal studies, but this should not preclude vaccination, because what we know is natural Bluetongue infection can cause prolonged reduction in bull fertility, and extensive use in UK and Europe has not identified vaccine-related fertility problems in bulls. And then just a note on vaccine availability. At present, there's no significant supply constraints anticipated, with manufacturers planning to meet production demands. On that, we are also hoping to put a little document together, which may be out slightly after this guidance document, around Bluetongue virus 8 vaccination and the differences with Bluetongue 3 in terms of legalities and how that's going to look, basically, if we need to use it. But yeah, happy to take any questions.
Absolutely great, Laura. So I think there's a lot of myth busting, and I invite the rest of the panel to come back. And we know Gordon is in the background somewhere as well. And thank you, Gordon, for continuing to interact on that question. So yeah, myth busting on vaccine use. So let's go back to the revaccination question then, because that has been asked. So what is the best advice?
It's difficult. At the moment, we're waiting for confirmation off several pharmaceutical companies. I believe some of the data is nearly there, but until we get formal a go ahead, then we just have to go on what we know, which is that it's probably going to last 12 months. And if 12 months is coming up on your farm where you're vaccinated, then it's likely you're going to need to revaccinate again. Whether that will be in sheep, that will likely be one dose, because that was what the primary course was. In cattle, it's likely to be one dose, but we're not sure on that yet. And yeah, the timing piece is what is really important. If it fits with what your current plan is, i.e. they're going out next month and you want to get it in them, then that would be the way to go. I would just get it in them rather than wait and see, because it's likely to be 12 months.
So Laura, is there a risk if the technical information is not available on time? Would there be a risk to double vaccinating cattle again?
I don't think there'll be a risk. It would just be a cost an extra cost to the farmer that may be unnecessary. Yeah, the primary course being 2 doses in cattle, I can't imagine it. Philippa, I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that, or Gordon, but yeah, until we get the information, just can't say what that's going to look like.
Yeah, no, and I understand that's almost a facetious question. You mentioned BTV8 vaccine. So what can we tell webinar attendees about that? Do we have it in the country? I understand there's a license to use it in the country, but is it in the country?
Philippa, you might want to come in on this as well, but my understanding is that it's not in the country and would have to be imported under SIC if use was needed, because there isn't an alternative available in the UK at the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pilar, do you want to, Philippa, sorry, do you want to come in on that?
I was just agreeing with Laura.
Yeah. Okay, great. Right. So another question here. Earlier it was mentioned the risk of virus overwintering in pregnant animals and then infectious calves, lambs being born. Is there any benefit to vaccinating spring calving herds or flocks to protect them from spread in the spring, or are midges unlikely to be a problem by then? Laura,
yeah, so the risk there would be that pregnant animals have been infected during pregnancy and they're going to give birth to a calf that has got Bluetongue virus in it and is suffering from the effects of Bluetongue, i.e. these dummy calves that were reported last year. I think there would be benefit in vaccinating off the back of that. The risk is still there, although we're in the vector low period. We don't know when we're going to come out of that. We weren't in it for very long last year. The midges could be about. We could see more spread. So yeah, I would vaccinate if they were my cows.
Yeah, no, great answer. Can you, or should you not vaccinate for Bluetongue alongside other vaccines?
I guess that's similar to other vaccines that are on the market that aren't Bluetongue. That a lot of work hasn't been done on a lot of vaccines to go hand in hand together, and they're not licensed to give together. But you've got to weigh up the risk of, do you handle cattle twice or sheep twice to vaccinate them with 2 different vaccines, or do you do them both in one go? Anecdotally, I know farmers that have done 2 vaccines at the same time and not seen any adverse effects. I'm not sure what the pharmaceutical companies might say on that, but yeah, there'd be no license to give it with something else and no trial data, I wouldn't think, but it's a risk-based decision on stress and handling. Yeah,
and whilst you guys and girls are all vets and I'm not, I suppose that the fallback position on most questions would be to have a discussion with your private vet. But moving on from the mixing vaccines question, a dairy or a beef herd testing for TB, would there be a risk on vaccinating before the TB read, i.e. so the first time you handle the cattle, would there be any risk to false TB readings if you vaccinated for Bluetongue on the same day as you jab for TB?
Sorry,
Pilar,
just to say that there shouldn't be any interference, but we have used actually bovine tuberculosis tests as visits to tap on for the BTV winter surveillance. The majority of the visits were TB tests, and the vets were drawing blood for Bluetongue, either at TT1 or TT2 of the TB test. But over to you, Laura.
Yeah. So I suppose
my usual stance on anything on day 1 of a TB test is leave it till day 2, whether that's another vaccine, worming, spot on, whatever. I would, usually leave till read day anyway. As far as interference goes, I haven't seen any data on that. But I would usually leave everything like that to day 2.
Yeah, there's a lot of sense in that. A question if my herd or flock is vaccinated and my neighbour is not, is the risk increased massively, or does the vaccine fully protect if it's given in the right time?
The data we had on cattle was that it prevents viremia and prevents clinical signs. So I would think that there wouldn't be a risk there. The vaccine should hold up. Sheep, the license was slightly different in the reduction of viremia claim, but yeah, having vaccine in them is likely to be significantly better than not having any vaccine in them.
Yeah, I suppose common sense says that if you've reached the immunity period, then yeah, or the cover period has started. There's one more question here that I've got, and then we can maybe have a chat amongst ourselves. A dairy herd buying in beef calves, would there be a risk in that if the calves were non-vaccinated? And if so, at what time of the year would you say the risk increases?
There would be potentially a risk of buying in anything from any farm disease-wise. The option is there to privately pre-movement them if you were worried, but obviously that would come at a cost to the farmer. If your dairy herd was vaccinated, then the risk to those cows would be less, but obviously if the calves are unprotected, then that is a gap in the immunity. What was the second part of the question?
I think you've kind of covered it. Oh, what time of year, sorry, would what time of year would that risk be at its highest?
Yeah, I wouldn't like to say. Yeah,
So
it's going to be. Yeah, go on, Pierre.
Pilar, we've had predicted dates when the high risk period is going to restart, and it tends to be around middle of May. Would that be fair? So from is it fair to say from May onwards would be a higher risk?
Yeah, so it's proportional to the temperature. It's proportional to the temperature, and then particularly from 15 degrees, the meat start being active, and then the higher the temperature, the more active they become for transmission. So it's really the majority of the transmission is meat dependent, so it relates to temperature, because that's what governs the activity of the midges as well as the duration of the extrinsic incubation period and its completion.
Good, thank you. So another question here. Last year we pushed hard to vaccinate all stock on farm, given relative lack of severe clinical signs and lack of significant vaccination uptake. I am moving to suggesting only vaccinating breeding stock this year. Does the panel think this is more appropriate?
I'll come in on that, Neil, shall I? I think what's important here is that it's a farm. We need to have the discussion with each individual farmer, advise best that we can, and then also appreciate that the farmers that we're working with have different levels of risk in terms of their likelihood to either protect all of their stock or to protect just their breeding flock. And I don't think there's an incorrect answer. I think it's a very individual decision, and because it's such a, say it's a new disease, it's been around a couple of years, but we've still got a lot of things about it that we don't know. It's quite difficult for us to predict what's going to happen in the future, and therefore I think we can just when we had with the European and the Dutch situation, and that question is really relevant because we were very concerned about how this may behave in the UK, and for different reasons we've found that so far we haven't seen that level of disease and mortality. Therefore it does make it difficult to keep going with the vaccination message, but I think it's important that we do keep presenting the risks and what the impacts are if they don't vaccinate, and help them judge that decision. I think it's difficult to have a widespread decision that is appropriate for all farmers.
Laura, Pilar, do you want to?
I mean, we have had cases of farmers coming down with Bluetongue and have animals very severely affected in some cases. I mean, I remember a lamb that had to be euthanized in Hampshire, in a case in Hampshire, and the breeding stock was vaccinated, and then the farmer decided to vaccinate all stock because obviously he had losses in the non-vaccinated stock.
And I think, from our experience at the National Beef Association and what we saw this time last year across on the eastern side of England, some horrific challenges during calving, high losses, empty cows. It was the fertility and reproductive system that seemed to be challenged in bovines. So maybe as a bare minimum, my answer to that question would be to do all your breeding stock, and probably to do young breeding stock that you intend to keep in the future as well, and start their protection quite early. So
yeah, absolutely, Neil. I agree with you. I think what we see this lambing season may also then give us further information to help make that decision for the years going forward for this, for this season. And with sheep, I think the important thing is that from a vaccine point of view, sorry, just going back on that topic, provided we've got they're vaccinated before the risk period, which is June, May, June time, that's where we're going to get the best from that vaccine and the best cover, over that summer period. And it's slightly easier, I think, in sheep flocks because because of the seasonality and the compactness of that lambing period. So I just wanted to mention that. It was just on my mind from further discussions. But yes, I think we'll be able to evaluate it on a farm by farm basis, how they use that who they vaccinate when we've gone through another season, particularly if we start to see more impacts on fertility and lambs this year.
yeah, great. Right, this will be the last question. Are there any specific recommendations for vaccination in herds with confirmed exposure? Do we know how long natural immunity will last, and how to predict the percentage of animals previously exposed on farm, or is it safer to just vaccinate all animals?
I mean, there will be immunity from Bluetongue in the animals that have gone through it, except very young calves that could resolve it. But generally, you have adult stock that have been infected and have gone through the disease. They will be immune for a number of years. I mean, disease consultants are best placed to answer that. But in the winter surveillance, we used to require 8 years since the vaccination to make sure that we did not have interference from the antibodies from those. So they're a good asset in animals that have gone through it because they will have a degree of immunity.
Yeah, okay. Laura, Philippa,
They
anything to
recover
add?
completely, which is another thing. Sorry, some
Yeah.
will not totally recover.
Yeah.
Just on the point of can you predict the percentage of animals previously exposed? I would think that would be a difficult task to try and come up with what proportion. My advice to my clients would be to do the whole herd or what was affected. Yeah, I don't know if you have any more on that, but I think you'd be hard pushed to try and work out what proportion.
And would it be fair to say that it would be very expensive to find out, much cheaper to vaccinate probably?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Right. Any more within the panel? Any more points to make? We've run over time a little bit, but I think it's always worth it if there are, powerful questions at the end. So there was one question asked at the very beginning that I didn't ask, and it was a request for a transcript. I will make sure that that question is answered directly after the meeting. I'm not sure if that option is available, but we'll get an answer to that question. I can only thank the panel. Thank you very much for your presentations, your input, your involvement, answering the questions. Thank everyone who has attended. Unfortunately, I don't think that Bluetongue is going to go away, and we need to continue to be extremely vigilant. I would, advocate to vaccinate as much as possible. Stock have got high values at the moment, and I don't, the vaccine is not cost prohibitive in any way that I can see. I would encourage everyone to participate in a vaccination. Let's get the national herd and the national flock protected. So finally, thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll probably see you at another webinar sometime soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.